Thank you for joining us today. My name is Tom Vander Rostein, and I serve as the president of the Louisville Forum. We meet on the second Wednesday of every month at Vincenzo's Restaurant. The Louisville Forum is a nonpartisan public issues group founded in 1984. The Forum hosts debates and discussions of contemporary and sometimes controversial public policy issues that affect the greater Louisville community. Although we may take up issues that have a national interest, we try to highlight the local perspective. For more information on the Louisville Forum, our programs, or to make reservations, please visit our website, louisvilleforum.org. And our topic today is the Jefferson County Attorney Democratic primary debate. The office of the county attorney is defined by two main statutes, KRS 15.725 and KRS 69.210. The Jefferson County attorney represents the Commonwealth in state district court. Those include prosecuting a variety of charges, including the areas of drunk driving, domestic violence, traffic, shoplifting, burglary, robbery, assault, drugs, and gun crimes. It frequently involves hearings involving bond and/or preliminary hearings. The county attorney also has divisions and assistant county attorneys in family court, child support, juvenile court, domestic violence, and also, of course, in the DUI courts, guardianship, and mental inquest courts. The county attorney also represents Jefferson County as a civil attorney. In that coordination, they represent the 50 departments of metro government, the mayor's office, 26 metro council representatives, numerous boards and commissions. Also is in charge of the Research Ordinance Commission. With these facts as our starting point today, I would like to introduce our debate panel today, Jefferson County Attorney Mike O'Connell and Metro Councilman Brent Ackerson. First, I will start with Mr. O'Connell. Mr. O'Connell has served as the Jefferson County Attorney since 2008. He was reelected last in 2014. Previously, he served 10 years as a judge in Jefferson District and Circuit Courts, as an assistant Jefferson County Attorney, and as a partner in private practice with his firm Parker and O'Connell. Mike is a Louisville native. He's a graduate of St. Xavier High School, Xavier University in Cincinnati, and the University of Notre Dame School of Law. Mike and his wife Ellen celebrated their 46th wedding anniversary in June. They have 3 children, Annie, Michael, and Matt, and 2 grandchildren, Emily and Drew. Mike was given He serves as an ex officio member of the Restorative Justice Louisville Board and is also a board member of the Louisville Bar Association. He also serves on the the board of the Kentucky Children's Home Corporation. Mr. O'Connell has previously served as a KVA bar governor and as a board member of the Louisville Metro Human Relations Commission, the Little Sisters of the Poor, Beacon House, Catholic Charities, and the Jefferson County Juvenile Justice Commission. Mike was named Outstanding County Attorney of the Year at the 2017 Kentucky Prosecutors Conference. He's also the 2017 recipient of the Center for Women and Families Public Service Award. Brent Ackerson was first elected as the 26th District Councilman in 2008 and was reelected in 2012 and again in 2016. Brent represents neighborhoods in the Urban Services District, which include Avondale, Bon Air Estates, Brookhaven, Highgate Springs, Klondike Acres, Melbourne Heights, Middale Estates, Midlane Park, and Roselawn. He also represents several areas in unincorporated Jefferson County, including Big Springs Garden, Breckenridge Estates, Bon Air Park, Hikes Point, Court Springs, Montclair Villa, Orchard Manor, and the Enclave. He also represents the cities of Meadowview Estates, Norburn Estates, Wellington, and part of St. Matthews. In 2018, Brent served as the chair of Metro Council's Government, Oversight, Audit, and Ethics Committee, and is a member of the Budget Committee. Brent is a native Louisvillian also. While in high school, he was recognized as a Kentucky Governor's Scholar. He received his Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Louisville, where he was recipient of the Lewis C. Kesselman Award for outstanding service to the Political Science Department. Brent is a graduate of the University of Akron College of Law. As a law student, he served as class representative to the Student Bar Association and was the regional winner of the American Bar Association's negotiation competition. Brent began his practice as a clerk for the Summit County, Ohio Court of Common Pleas. His first jury trials with the City of Akron Public Defender's Office. He presently practices with the Ackerson Law Office, where he focuses on business and employment matters, wills, trust, and probate matters, and personal injury matters. In 2011, Brent was the recipient of the Gary Gupton Community Award for his part in helping to complete the new Down Syndrome of Louisville facility, the only facility of its kind in the United States which cares for the needs of individuals with Down syndrome and their families. Brent and his family are residents of Browns Lane. Please welcome our debate participants today. And now we'll begin the debate. In the order determined by a coin toss, each candidate will give an opening comment for up to 5 minutes. Mr. O'Connell has won that coin toss. As timekeeper, I will warn the candidates when they have 1 minute and 15 seconds remaining in their statements. Following these in the same order, each candidate may ask the other candidate a question. Following these questions, we will take questions from our audience. At the conclusion of the program, each candidate will given up to 2 minutes to make a closing statement. And with these rules in place, I am now going to ask Mr. O'Connell to give his opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Mr. Ackerson, I feel like I'm up in a jury trial here. Ladies and gentlemen of the forum, thank you, members of the forum, for hosting this event for us today. I am Mike O'Connell, and I want to continue working as your Jefferson County attorney for one simple and important reason. I love my job. I love the law. The law for me has been a calling for a long time. The foundation I received at places like St. X High School, Xavier University, and the University of Notre Dame School of Law grounded me in faith and compelled me to serve. That daily service, that relentless effort to do good, lifts people up and changes their lives for the better. Those impacts are often out of the public's view. A safety plan for a domestic violence victim, winning a child support award so that a working mother can keep heat on in the winter, or beating a telecom giant in court to open the doors to Google Fiber. I feel good knowing that each day we have made a difference. I love coming in every day and tackling the most difficult issues that our city faces. Suit up and show up, I tell lawyers that work for me. Turning to those issues, I'd like to conduct a little experiment right now, if you don't mind. If you know a family member, a friend, a neighbor, a coworker, or others who have struggled with addiction, please raise your hand. Look at that. Amazing. Even among this group, sitting in one of our city's finest restaurants, I'd say roughly 98% of the people in this room raised your hand. If you did not, you are fortunate, but your numbers are dwindling. Drugs and the opioid crisis fuel the bulk of gun violence in our city. Our youth are killing each other over the opportunity to sell drugs to our youth. Just this weekend, I received the latest plea for help. A mother, and I'll call her Jane, shared her story of how her son had experimented with oxycodone as a teenager. He's in his mid-20s now, locked up for stealing to fund his substance use. Jane finished her email to me by saying, quote, "I never thought I would say this, but thank you for fighting to keep him in jail." End of quote. Now, what mother should have to make that comment to a county attorney? Jane looks to jail because she's looking to interrupt her son's addiction. That thought has made the Jefferson County Jail, for those of you that don't know, the largest detox facility in the state of Kentucky. And we couldn't say that 10 or 15 years ago, could we? You and I both know we cannot jail our way out of this crisis, but it's a path to recovery now for some people. So I've pushed for more use of Casey's Law, which some of you may have heard of, named for young Casey Wethington up in Covington, who died of a heroin overdose. Casey's Law allows parents and families to use the leverage of the court system to force a loved one into treatment outside of jail. We created a step-by-step website about the law and found funding for a new advocate to help families through the process. In addition to helping those who struggle with addiction, I've sought to hold those responsible for this epidemic accountable. Drug distributors flooded our community with pain pills and failing to monitor or halt suspicious orders. These companies, bigger than Google, bigger than Amazon, have profited off this epidemic to such a degree that fines of $150 million to them is just the cost of doing business. So I pushed for Louisville Metro to sue the distributors for the harm they have caused. Louisville is now a leader in this fight, and I'm presently one of just 10 people in the United States that is representing the hundreds of cities, states, and territories that have joined in this matter. This plague doesn't care how much money you have. It doesn't discriminate. Doesn't care what zip code you live in. Doesn't care what color you are. Doesn't care about your occupation or your age. I know firsthand that overdoses are the leading cause of death for Americans, and think about this, under the age of 50 in this country. This plague took my beautiful boy Matt in the same way it has gutted hundreds of thousands of other families. Matt was an Army veteran like me, so I'm immensely proud that during my tenure in office, among other things, we've helped start the first ever Veterans Treatment Court in Kentucky to fight for those who fought for us. I said in the beginning that I love my job. I love that I get to stand up for people who need help, moms like Jane, kids like Casey Wethington, and my own son, Matt. I will continue my fight against this plague creatively, aggressively, and passionately because it's the only way to stop the violence in our streets and the loss of our young. And I hope that what I bring to this office makes you proud of the county attorney who stands before you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I don't write out speeches in advance. I like to speak from my heart because I've got a passion for the city. I've been one of your outspoken Metro Council people for nearly a decade now. For those of you who know me, I question authority. I don't care who you are in this town. I'm willing to call you out if I think you're doing wrong or not doing your job. I look at our present situation and I say, electing a county attorney should not be about someone playing it safe. When you elect public officials, you expect results. You expect them to do things. And as I look around, just over the last 4 years since the last election for this county attorney's office, the question that everyone has to ask themselves, are things getting better or are things getting worse? Are the murder rates on the rise? Is the heroin epidemic on the rise? Is youth violence on the rise? We look around and all those things are on the rise. And so the question is, what are we doing to address that? These are all new 21st century problems that we cannot continue to address with 1980s mentalities. We've got to bring new ideas to the table. We've got to try things, have the willingness to try new concepts. And some of those concepts might fail, but even in failure, we're still doing good because we're trying to change something that's not working. If we continue to do the things we're doing now, we will continue to see results get worse for us. And what I'm saying is this is, the Casey's Law Advocate, neither one of us can take credit for that. A lot of folks press for Casey's Law. Mike's office is implementing it. We funded it over on Metro Council, but it's going to take much more than little steps like that. We've got to change the way that we're dealing with people in this town, especially in light of the heroin epidemics and the other problems. We've got to change the way that we're dealing with people when it comes to misdemeanor crimes, trying to get them back into the workforce. And so what I want you to do is I want you to think about throughout this election is what ideas have you seen in the last 4 years that really made an impact on this community? Because again, things are getting worse. And what ideas have you heard here in the last 6 months during this very heated campaign that tells you there's policy changes or there are approaches or new ideas that are coming to try to address this 21st century new problems? Because ultimately that's your all's choices. If you're content with the way things are, you should not vote for me. You should vote for Mike. If you're not content with the way things are, and ultimately you feel that we should be trying to make a change, we should be willing to press the envelope to come up with new solutions to these new problems, then I'd like you to take a look at what I'm talking about. And I appreciate all of you being here today. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. And now, in accordance with the rules of the debate, since Mr. O'Connell went first, he may ask a question of Mr. Ackerson at this time.
Mr. Ackerson, let me ask you, have you ever been a prosecutor or a judge or managed a large law office in your career?
Good question, Mr. O'Connell. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I know you have been a judge back in the, I believe it was the 80s and 90s. Then you left after 10 years to go back to private practice. And I know that prior to your taking over the county attorney's office, that you had not run an office the size of 420 employees also. I have not been a judge, and I'm not a prosecutor. And in fact, I think that is a benefit. I come from the outside of the system. If we're going to reform this system and come up with new ideas, you should be looking from someone from the outside. I'm a uniquely qualified attorney, a uniquely qualified public policy maker who is willing to address setting in motion the changes that we need. Ultimately, the office runs, the county attorney is not going to court every day. We all know that. Mr. O'Connell's setting policy. His head of the criminal division sitting here today. He sets policy for her then to implement to her departments. The head of his civil division sitting here today. He sets policy for Matt to handle and direct down to his departments. It's much like the mayor. The mayor is not an expert at paving roads. You get the right people under you. And what it has the greatest ability to do, though, is set policy. To decide, here's how we're going to deal with people. You know, we need to stop locking up people for stupid things and start working with them, cleaning up their records and getting them reemployed. We need to reserve jail space. Right now, I understand last week we just opened up the space above the courthouse again. That's a fire hazard. It's illegal. It's a disaster waiting to happen. But at the end of the day, we've got to do it because we keep locking up people for stupid reasons. The question is ultimately is, does this town want to spend $400 million on building a new jail? Or should we put that to better use around here and start addressing our jail overcrowding problem and preserve the space we have now? I can think of a heck of a lot better things to do with $300 to $400 million to make this town better than build a new jail. So, but you are correct. I have not been a judge, and I have not been a prosecutor, and I'm proud of that, and I think that that makes me uniquely qualified to bring the changes needed to the office at hand. Thank you.
And now pursuant to those same rules, you may ask a question of Mr. O'Connell, Mr. Ackerson.
Mike, I want to ask you about what I consider sort of an ethical problem with the office, and that is 4 years ago, the Courier-Journal told you that your pressure on your employees to donate to your campaigns, they considered it political patronage. Since then, though, they told you to stop, but since then, you've amassed over another $100,000 as of December this year for your campaign from your employees who are paid with taxpayer dollars. I've said that it's unethical. I've said that I won't do that, and I'll put it into that. Your daughter, Annie's running for circuit court judge. She's even announced that she will not take money from county attorney employees. Why do you continue to do it when it puts a black eye on the political system?
Is the question why I continue to do it?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure. First of all, it's not an ethical violation if you so falsely stated. Secondly, you know, I was an assistant county attorney years ago, and with a great staff then and a great staff that we have now. I'm blessed every day to have great people working around me, both on the prosecution side and on the civil side. I am honored that people think enough of the way we run the office, the work that we have done, the initiatives that we have started, and the faith they have in me and the office that they would contribute to my campaign. I do not ask people for political contributions. I do not do that. If they choose to give, I will accept it. I've done it throughout my time as county attorney, and I'm honored that they do that, and I'm going to continue to do that if they wish to give. So your gratuitous comment about my daughter, who's running for circuit court judge, not taking contributions from county attorneys, well, that's that's sort of a silly question, because obviously as a circuit court judge, she's not going to preside if she's elected over anything in connection with my office, and she's made that decision, and I congratulate her for it. So, but I've got great people sitting in this room that have contributed to my campaign. Some of the finest lawyers I have ever had the privilege of being associated with are sitting in this room today, and they support me with everything they do every day. And when I run for election, or re-election, they support me financially as well. And I'm honored that they think enough of this office and the work that they do that they want it to continue. So yes, that's why I accept them.
And now we will accept some questions from our audience members, and Mr. Dan Hartledge, who's on our board, will read those to whoever they're directed to, and there's the microphone. I believe it is Dan, yes.
Okay. A lot of questions, so we'll go through them as quickly as we can and as efficiently as we can. A lot of questions having to do with jail, overcrowded issues. Catch and release is a phrase I've seen several times. There's not enough room in the jails to keep people in there. You both touched on that in your opening remarks a little bit, but could you expound on that a little bit, maybe both of you, on just the question of not having enough room to incarcerate people and keep them incarcerated?
Who goes first? Is this going in the same order?
We can go in the same order. That's
All right,
fine.
I'll respond. I won the coin toss, but unlike the NFL, if you win the coin toss here today, you don't get to choose whether you're going to defer to the second half. You have to go first. So we'll keep that order going. That's a great question. Most people in this room don't know this, but Mr. Ackerson would know about the budget side of it, that it's about a $60 million in annual revenue commitment by Louisville Metro to the jail, Metro Corrections. Our corrections, our jail is certified for 1,793 beds. We get weekly and monthly what they call pop sheets from corrections that tell us the population seems to hover all the time at about 2,000 to 2,100. When it gets above, I think, 2,100, the director decides to try to open space above the old jail above the police headquarters. But I've said this many times, and I learned this early on, that somebody once told me that jails are for people that you're afraid of, not for who you're mad at. And that is so true, particularly in today's society. So we have worked very hard in my office to put revenue into people being in arraignment court, to look at alternatives to jail incarceration on bonds, so that we don't have this situation going on. And as I mentioned in my opening comments, the jail is the largest detox center in the state of Kentucky. It's the largest detox center in the state of Kentucky. And on bonds have received a lot of attention over, especially recently, but we work off pretrial services assessment. There's a risk scale on somebody coming back. There's a risk scale on whether or not they may or may not reoffend, et cetera, et cetera. And we have alternatives to incarceration, which are employed a lot. But when you have someone who is truly dangerous to the community, in my opinion, you don't send them home under home incarceration. If they've been charged with murder, if they've confessed to murder, if they covered up the body for 2 days, you don't send that person home on home incarceration. So yes, I object to that sort of abuse of discretion when it comes to reviewing cases. But we're always looking for creative ways to do things to try to keep the jail population as low as possible. 80% of the people in jail are held there pre-trial. Only 20% of them are serving a sentence. And the state has the obligation to pick up the prisoners that are committed to them in 45 days. Well, they don't always do that. So we have those type of folks that are in corrections as well, and I've gone way over my time. Okay,
And you
thank you.
can go over an appropriate amount of time also.
That's all right. Listen to what we just heard. The office is dedicating resources to arraignments and to other things to try to deal with jail population problems. We've been hearing about it for years. What we're trying is not working. The reality is this, is we consistently open up the old jail above the courthouse. Again, a fire hazard. There's no sprinkler systems in there. In my opinion, it's illegal. It's a disaster waiting to happen. It costs this city $350,000 a month to operate that. That's about $4 million a year that we keep going over. So the problem is clear. If 80% of the people are in there for pretrial detention, Mike's right in the sense that we do not want to let murderers out. But what we've got to start doing is freeing up that bed space so we can keep murderers in. Those people that Mike talked about that we're mad at, we need to be working with those people to get them out of there quicker so that we don't end up in a situation where we've got to build a $400 million jail. Simple as that. It's a problem that's been existing for years, and there hasn't been a solution posed yet. It's time for new approaches to this office regarding that, because I'm petrified from the Metro Council side of already, pensions, crisis, and other things. Our budget is getting tighter and tighter, and we've got to figure out how we're going to put our priorities in the city to make sure that we do what we need to do, and that starts with the crime problems that we're facing in this jail. So, thank you.
Next question, please, Dan.
Yeah, this is a question targeted to both of you guys, I suppose, but it has to do with Brent. You, on your campaign Facebook site yesterday, posted a video of Mike O'Connell making comments on TV regarding the release of names of teenagers who alleged they were raped by LMPD officers back a year or so ago. The question is, your point on Facebook is that that's a risky thing to do, to suggest to the teenagers. Mr. O'Connell, I think your comment was that it's a matter of leveling the playing field. So if you guys could both comment on that issue.
Well, let me be clear on that matter. I want to clear it up that neither I nor the city want any abuse victim's identity to be made public. And I said that within 5 or 6 hours of the comment that the questioner is referring to. We work tirelessly every day in protecting victims and sexual assault, physical assault, and other things. This issue on whether or not the names of these individuals who have filed these complaints in our civil courts and asking for money damages is currently pending before the circuit court, and that judge or judges will make a decision on whether or not those names are able to be disclosed. Interestingly, the former council, who was also on the Metro Council and president of the council, before he got disqualified because of ethical reasons, and who signed Mr. Ackerson's filing papers for this office, showed up at my office the day after he filed the suit with a supposed confidential letter demanding $6 million to settle the case before anybody had even been served in the suit. He showed up to line his pockets as a member of Metro Council, and he was not able to do that because a court here stopped him from doing that. We have a motion pending right now against Mr. Ackerson and Mr. Yates, who are also in circuit court, and we have alleged that they violated the rules of professional conduct, not the Metro Ethics Commission, the rules of professional conduct, for again trying to line their pockets with money in a case in which they are opposite the government for which they serve. But to reiterate, neither I nor the city are asking for the names of these victims to be disclosed. That'll be a decision that the circuit court will make.
Very interesting that we got off topic big time there. The reality is this, I didn't say what Mike said. It was a newscast that we posted, that he spoke to the media coming out of court. They were his comments, and his comments were strong. They were clear. Don't take my word for it. Go watch the newscast. He made it clear that he wanted to level the playing field, is the way he called it. He thought it was only appropriate that if the officers were named, these officers who committed heinous rape of children were named, that he thought that these victims, because they were over the 18 now, that their names should also be out there. Those are his words, not mine. I'm not mincing words. I'm not chopping his words up. Go listen to his own words. Now, he might have, after the fact, publicly changed his position after he got back to the office and everyone said, Mike, what the heck did you just say? I can't believe that you believe that. But it's one thing to retract your position. It's what you say, and those are his words. And again, the fact that we're here today, he's telling you, well, it'll be up to the court to decide if these folks, I don't see any motions filed by Mike to say, let me keep this secret as far as their names and identities. Let's deal with this case, protect victims. And that's what we should be doing. Because what happened in this town makes me ashamed. It should make all of us ashamed. Kids were hurt. And at some level, there was a cover-up. At some level. And the hope is that someday we'll get to that level if folks in this government don't try to sweep it under the rug with confidential settlements or whatever else, because we deserve the truth. This town needs to clean up its act. And so my hope is that we'll get to that truth, but we'll see. But ultimately, that video that we put on Facebook speaks for itself. Don't take my word for it. Don't take Mike's word for it. Go listen to it and take your own ears' words for it. Thanks.
Next question, please, Dan.
Yeah, next question, sort of a two-part question having to do with gang issues. Number one, in your current positions, in terms of public service, could you each talk a little bit about what you've seen and what you maybe have tried to do to address the gang issue? And number two, your thoughts on the recent gang-related legislation that has been presented making recruitment of gang members a tougher crime.
According to literature, there's about 33,000 gangs in the United States of America, and the average age of gang members is between 15 and 24. In this jurisdiction, there never has been, to my understanding, a indictment with respect to so-called gang-related activity. The police and the administration know who the worst actors are in this community, or at least they have assistance from the FBI and others, and they know that. But here's my feeling about this legislation. The major problems we have in our community is the opioid epidemic and violence. Those are the major problems we have. There is nothing in this bill that does anything to address those issues, which in many instances are the root cause of why young people get involved with gangs. The poverty, home issues, drug issues. The root causes of this are the things that money needs to be spent towards doing. I think the financial impact on the proposed legislation is $19.5 or $20 million, where I think that money could be used in better ways. This legislation, if it's just a prop to pass a piece of legislation that doesn't go or do anything toward the root causes of these issues and runs the risk of profiling further, disparate treatment further of young people in this community, I would not be in favor of it. If it saves lives, if there's anybody that can demonstrate that these have, I'm all about saving lives, whatever we do. If it can be pointed out that saving this will save lives, and for this reason or that reason, then they can point to it, I think it would then be something worth looking at. But our office doesn't prosecute felony gun crimes anyway. The Commonwealth Attorney's Office does. But I think we need to focus more attention on the root causes of what's causing gang violence and in this community, and not on a piece of legislation which you should watch it, because watch and see if anybody gets indicted on these under this statute. Pay close attention to that.
We're going to lighten the tension and say this. Well said, Mike. I agree with him. And that is this gang violence bill is ridiculous. It's again, the 1980s mentality to address the problems of a 21st century. They don't work, and that's why we're continuing to be in this spiral we're in now. I think that Mike is also correct in this sense, because we've been talking about this for a while. I've been talking about it for years on Metro Council, and that is, if we want to get to the root of our problems, the drug problems, the gang problems, the reality of this situation is we've got to start investing money on the front end of that problem. Think of it like our health care insurance. 10 years ago, if you went to Humana and said, I want some preventive medicine, they'd say it's not covered. Today, they'll pay for you to go to the gym if you can prove you're going, because they recognize from a business model, a little money invested on the front end saves a lot on the back end. What we need to be doing is this. Folks are joining gangs because they don't have any hope otherwise. Go out to some troubled areas. Look around at what those families live in and what those kids see every day. If we don't give them opportunities, we don't give them hope, we don't help them to succeed when they're young, and I'm talking grade school, folks. Grade school is where we need to be at, because we base prison beds for the next 20 years based upon third grade reading scores. We've got to be investing in these youth, because that's the battleground. We've got to give them a chance to say, you know what, I've got options other than the gang. Because let's face it, if you've got no options and you see no hope for the future, and all you see is the block that you live on and you're around the violence and the gangs, but you see they've got money and they can afford to do these things, not to mention the pressures that come from living in those neighborhoods where the gangs are around you, either you get with the group or you're the outsider. Those are the problems. So Mike and I are in agreement on that, and that is this community needs to put focus financially on empowering youth. Now, where this office comes into play is how we're dealing with those youth. What are we doing to help them versus jail them? What are we doing to help their parents versus jail them? Because at the end of the day, part of the youth succeeding is not only the programs investing money, but it's trying to help their parents do better in life. Get them employed, get their records cleaned up. Most misdemeanor crimes are driven by circumstances. It could be the drugs that cause them to steal. It could be the fact that they're unemployed that causes them to steal or break the law. That's circumstance driven. And we've got to work with those people, because at the end of the day, for those youth to succeed, we've got to help their parents succeed also. I hope that answers your question.
Next question, please, Dan.
Yeah, I have a few questions here that are targeted at one or the other, but certainly both of you guys are encouraged to answer it and respond. This one is specifically to you, Mr. Ackerson. Why were you the only Metro Council Democrat to vote against the appointment of Dr. Ricky Jones to the Citizens Commission on Public Accountability?
Yes. I was the only Metro Council Democrat to vote against that appointment. There were a number of Metro Council Democrats who did not vote on that issue. As I said that evening, and all you have to do is go back and watch the tapes. You get online. I talked to Dr. Jones and explained my position. I did not, in my time, at that time, based upon the controversy of that board, the way things were handled, did not feel that it was the right appointment at that time. And it's not easy knowing. My vote, I knew where I was one of the last people to vote. I knew where the votes were at. The easy thing to do is when you say, well, the other side has the votes, I'll just vote with them. That's the easy thing to do. I've never taken the easy road. And I know that might have upset Dr. Jones. I told him that night, explained my position on the record, and then went to him afterwards, shook his hand and told him there wasn't anything personal, congratulated him on his victory. But at the end of the day, I did not feel that was the right appointment at that time. It wasn't anything personal. It wasn't anything racially driven. It was me having to make a tough choice, and I made that choice. knowing that folks like Mike and some of the other folks in this room have been critical of me on this campaign trail, trying to make a racial issue out of it, and it hasn't been. So I stand behind that vote. As I said, I explained before, I'd be more than happy to sit down anytime with Dr. Jones and talk about other issues that we can work together to advance the causes of the city.
Would you like to respond, Mr. O'Connell?
I would just say that your vote was embarrassing and shameful, and I trust that something like that would never happen again. But it seems to be consistent with some of your votes on council, especially Mr. Ackerson has touted his accomplishments as a legislator, council member, and he doesn't really have many, because if you heard specifics, he'd already told you by now. But he was successful this time. There's one he's been very successful at. And you want to look at the whole person we're talking about here. He and several of his colleagues on Metro Council voted with the 9 Republicans on Metro Council to kill the Prospect Cove affordable housing project, which was approved by unanimous vote of the Planning and Zoning Commission. And here's how successful he was. Shortly after that happened, I got a letter from the United States Department of Justice Civil Rights Division advising me as the lawyer for this community that the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice was initiating an investigation into Metro Council. That has now cost, and is going to cost taxpayers thousands of dollars. We've had to hire counsel to represent Metro Council himself. That vote, he succeeded in doing that, in bringing the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division into this community for the first time that I can ever recall ever happening here.
Mr. Ackerson, if you can just reply to just the Prospect
Just the
Cove.
Prospect Cove. Number one is shame on Mike for being critical of me that I might vote with Republicans. Shame on you. This is not that's part of the problem with our system, that people can't work across party lines. Number two is I stand behind that vote. His office was involved in the process also. It's not been my vote that brought the Justice Department in. If someone wants to allege there was a problem, they can allege that, and the Justice Department can come in. I stand behind my vote on that, because at the end of the day, if we are going to extend housing out, and I have been a huge proponent of affordable housing, huge, championing the full funding of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. You go talk to the folks at Cloud about that. But at the end of the day, I stand behind that vote, because this is why. If we are going to put that project, being the first project of its kind, into place, it has to be a home run. There can't be any guesses or if we build it, they will come type situations, because if it fails, it will kill the longevity and the potential of any of those projects taking place in the East End. This project, as I said on the record, and I've said since then, no bus lines, no jobs, a number of other factors that came into play. And so what's interesting is up until the lawsuit to the feds come in, Mike has been our attorney on this, and I find it interesting that he would be critical of what he's given legal advice on in advance. You would think that as the attorney, you would have no comment on this whatsoever. But politically, he wants to try to make hay over this, and so I get it. Go look at the record. I've been very clear about why I voted the way I did, and I stand behind that.
Next question, please, Dan.
Next question, again, is this is to Mr. O'Connell, but certainly both of you guys can reply. Question, Mr. O'Connell, is that for years the practice in terms of getting contributions from employees has been something that's been questioned, and employees historically have expressed concerns about being pressured. The question is, why not just stop it?
I think we've already asked and answered that question, with all due respect.
Understood.
That question's already been asked and answered.
Well, I'll answer that question if you don't want to. And,
I'll adopt my previous answer to the question. I'll adopt that as my answer to that question, so you can keep going.
Thank you. A simple question here is are these employee contributions required or not? In 2014, there was a primary for this county attorney's office. Okay, there was no general. No one challenged in the general. But a simple look at here, this is Mr. O'Connell's General election finance report, 30-day post. So this is essentially 30 days after the general election when he had no competition. He's listed 3 individuals on here, one of them, a county attorney, for $1,000, another one for $500. Now, what's interesting is the $500 contribution came in after the election was over, and then another one for $100. I've got a stack here from that general election where essentially 39 employees gave over $7,500 for an election that was not taking place. Why? Why would an employee of the county attorney's office give a $500 check when their boss has already won election? Why would an employee of that office give a $1,000 check when their boss had already won election? There was nothing else. There was no one challenging. I didn't file against Mike until December 15th of 2017. Had no election. Why are these people doing this if patronage is not still around? If it doesn't stink of, if I don't give the required amount during each cycle, that I might lose my job or might not be promoted. It makes no sense whatsoever. Now, you can say it's because I'm a great guy and they love it, but that just doesn't make sense. And this is the black eye on our political system that we face. We faced it once before with Pop Malone, and it's continuing today.
If you'd like to briefly address that, Mr. O'Connell?
No.
Okay, thank you. Dan, please, next question.
Next question. Would either of you advocate for securing the border to curb the flow of drugs and gangs into this country and to perhaps address the drug problem we have here? And if so, how would you like to secure that border?
Aren't you glad you're first?
Yeah.
You want to both punt on that one, Mike?
Yeah, I'll take it. That's certainly not anything within the jurisdiction of the county attorney's office. But now I'll tell you what, I didn't see that one coming. I didn't see that one coming. That is such a complex issue, you can't cover that in something like this. But I certainly think that our president has posed some of the most ridiculous proposals to deal with both the border and the other terrible things that he's done towards DACA and immigrants that mean so much to not only this community, but other communities around the United States. I guess he's now talking about sending National Guard units and soldiers there from our military to do things. So we are a nation. Certainly nobody wants criminals, running across the border of the United States and committing crimes. I mean, that's common sense. We don't want that. But that's not what happens in the fallout. The people that are damaged and injured, families that are torn, people that are being picked up here and sent back to Mexico who are solid citizens and have been here for years and years. That's not what this country is about. There's a proper way to enforce those federal laws. Perhaps if Congressman Yarmouth was here, he could discuss it as well. But those are just some of my comments, and I hope the lunacy ceases on this issue.
Mr. Ackerson.
This is going to be the second time today that we'll break the ice. Mike, you're absolutely correct. Let's get on to some good questions.
Next question. Oh,
Go ahead, Dan.
I'm sorry. Next question, I guess it can be addressed to Mr. O'Connell, but to both of you can respond, and that is, could you talk a little bit about your role in terms of restorative justice?
I can talk a lot about my role in restorative justice. I am, one of the first things I did in the office was to work on a committee that was formed to introduce restorative justice practices in this community. Specifically, the project was going to be introduced into juvenile court. And for those of you that don't know what RJ is, as we call it, it's when the victim and the perpetrator actually get together by agreement to discuss a resolution of the case and mutually, which is an extraordinary concept that has been used worldwide. But we started it in juvenile court, and I had to give permission for that to be in juvenile court as a process. I serve on the Restorative Justice Board as part of that. Our goal has always been to try to take it into adult court, and we did that with a pilot project with 2 of the district court judges currently, and we're working to put as many of those adult cases in the pipeline as we can. But in RJ Louisville, Restorative Justice Louisville now is a 501c3 corporation. So I generously solicit your interest and contributions if you want to help them out. But I've been involved with RJ since almost the day I stepped into the office.
Mr. Ackerson?
Yes, great question because of this. Restorative justice, if you want to learn more about it, this Friday, the two of the main people, which is Judge Bissick and Tom Williams, a private attorney here in town with Stoll Keenan, they'll be speaking at the Earth and Spirit Center. There'll be dinner, and then from 7 to about 8:30, they'll be talking about restorative justice. Mike does serve on the board as an ex officio person by virtue of his office. And Mike did give permission for the pilot project to take place. It couldn't have taken place if he hadn't given permission. But the problem is this. Restorative justice is a phenomenal concept that we need to be embracing. We need to be empowering, and we need to be funding. Now, at present, it maybe makes up about 15-20% of the juvenile matters. So it hasn't been expanded enough there, and it hasn't been funded. You know, we've got a lot of money that comes in from Drive Safe Louisville and other things that come into the county attorney's operating budget. Why aren't we taking that money and funding restorative justice so it can actually make a bigger dent in things? Because again, things like restorative justice and these 21st century concepts are what we need to attempt to try to stem the crime problems that what we've been doing hasn't been helping. We've got to come up with these new ideas. And so restorative justice is really an amazing concept. When you look at originally I think it was from New Zealand, they've had like a 60% drop in recidivism. You know, if I'm saying that correctly, I apologize. A little tongue-tied there, but it works. And we've got to be looking to other places that have led the charge. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to copy the wheel. And we've got to have the willingness to do that. And we've got to put our money where our mouth is and do that. Thank you.
Okay, at this time in the program, we have approximately 4 minutes left, so I'm going to ask the candidates in the same order in which they gave their opening statements to give their closing statement. Each candidate has up to 2 minutes, and Mr. O'Connell will go first.
Thank you, Tom. Mr. Ackerson, I want to again thank everybody for being here today. It's been a great conversation, and I hope that for those of you that aren't used to this kind of conversation, I hope that you learned something today. I'm going to simply say that campaigns matter in this community. Candidates matter, and certainly votes matter. But as my friend Morgan McGarvey says frequently, and elections have consequences. And this is a office that, as I said in my opening remarks, I love very much, and I love very much the people that work with me on a daily basis. We do really good work, and with limited assets. When I was asked the other day by a group, what's the biggest problem your office faces, and I said it's like most others in government, budget, offices, and trying to retain good people that we hire. The county attorney's office became the legal representative for all of Metro government when the merger occurred. Some of you would recall years ago the city of Louisville had its own law department and fiscal court. Jefferson County had the county attorney's office, and when it merged, the legislature decided to expand the duties of the county attorney's office exponentially. So we represent all of Metro government, the council, all of its members, all of the agencies. We do defense work. We do plaintiff's work on behalf of the city, as we're doing with the opioid litigation, and we operate in the Hall of Justice. That building historically has been the second or third most busy building on a daily basis in the entire state of Kentucky. And we do good work over there. Under our responsibility under ABA standards is to seek justice. We are supposed to be ministers of justice. And I think we've done that and we can be proud of it. Brent has served on the council, as you mentioned, and he served as council member for District 26, and I'm not sure what legislation he's ever proposed of note in the 8 or 10 years that he's been on council, but I want to share with you something he said in a podcast last week about this office and his work for the citizens. He was asked a question about whether or not if he lost, if he'd still remain in office. And he said, yes, if I don't, quote, if I don't win this race, then the people of Metro Louisville get to keep me on as Metro 26 councilman. So I like to say, if you think I've done a good job on council, vote me into the county attorney's office and let me reform that office. Continuing, and do a good job there. But this is the part. If you don't like what I do on Metro Council, you should vote me into the county attorney's office and get me off Metro Council. What is that? Those words speak volumes. This isn't, I'm tired of this job, of which I haven't really excelled at. So if you're going to vote me out of council, make me Jefferson County attorney so I can continue the good work on behalf of the people in this community. So you do have a choice, and it's a serious choice. And I humbly ask you, I thank you for being here today, and I humbly ask you to consider me when you go to the polls on May 22nd. And thanks very much.
Well, just before I start, I'll quickly respond to the podcast. Like many things, you're on the radio, and I made a joke. A few of you laughed, a few of you didn't. At the end of the day, if we cannot make light of situations, I don't want to be that person. Yes, I made a joke sort of saying, I'm qualified is what I was talking about. I said, vote me in over there, so if you like me, vote for me. I made the joke then said, if you don't like me, if you don't like my votes on Metro Council, you think I'm too progressive or too Democratic for you or too liberal for you, then vote me over, to here so you get rid of me. And that was the intent of that. But as usual, Mike wants to take that out of context. Let's keep things in context, and that is this. He's right when he quotes Morgan that says elections have consequences. We saw that nationally. We've seen that a number of other levels. We have elected Mike. He was appointed, first of all, to the office. So we've elected him twice to this office. And we're back to, are things getting better? Are we content operating with the status quo? When Mike won 4 years ago, he gave a quote to WDRB, and he said, we're going to stay the course. I think things are going great. We've stayed the course, and 4 years later, things aren't going great. The actions speak louder than the words. And that's what ultimately you've got to decide is, what are we going to do? Are we willing to take chances? It's not just about saying, we're keeping the lights on and we're a lighthouse keeper and, it's a crowded jail system over there, it's a crowded courthouse, and we're moving people through. That's not cutting the mustard anymore. And you, the taxpayers, the residents of this county, should be demanding more of your elected officials. If you elect me and I do not follow through with my promises, in 4 years you should vote me out and bring the next person in who can make a difference and make change. That's what politics is supposed to be about. It's not about a job. It's not about a career. It's about making a difference. And that's what you should be looking for. And I hope that you will compare the apple and the orange. And I hope that you will look to make a difference, if not for yourself, for your kids and for your grandkids. This office only gets voted on every 4 years. That's 25 times in a century. Do we have 4 years to waste? Thank you for coming today, and thank you for your time.